He thought the sickness would pass, the weakness would fade, and life would return to normal. The house was clean, the food was warm, and the woman beside him smiled like nothing was wrong. But somewhere in that house, someone was counting his breaths. He did not know the drink in his hand was not made to heal him. He did not know the woman he trusted was watching his body fail, day after day, waiting. And he did not know that the quiet maid who cleaned his floors had already seen the truth. She had noticed his hands shake. She had seen the way his steps slowed. She had heard words that were not meant for her ears. On one quiet night, when the halls were still and the lights were low, she pulled him into the dark and told him not to breathe, not to move, not to make a sound, because the people talking in the next room were not planning his future. They were planning his end. And in that moment, without money, without power, without warning, his life rested in the hands of the one person he had never truly seen. Daniel Carter sat at the big table and smiled, because that is what people expected. He took a sip of the green drink and said he was fine. His wife, Melissa, moved with calm steps. His brother, Evan, told a small joke and laughed. The house smelled clean. The staff moved in and out doing their jobs. Daniel felt a strong tiredness come over him. He blamed late nights and long meetings. He told himself to rest. He rubbed his eye and tried to read papers, but the words would not stay. The room spun a little. He thought it was stress. He did not know it was poison. The night was quiet. Daniel went to his study and worked for a while. He felt hot and then cold. He heard a soft sound from the kitchen. Melissa walked in with a cup and a smile. "You need this," she said. She pressed the cup into his hand and kissed his cheek like it was small and kind. He drank while she watched. His mouth felt odd. His head grew heavy. He tried to stand, but his legs felt weak. He moved to the couch and closed his eyes. A sudden movement at the door made him open his eyes. Naomi Brooks, the woman who cleaned his rooms, stood there. She had always been quiet and careful. Tonight, her face was set and quick. She pulled him into the closet before he could speak. Her hands were firm and moved like someone who had done hard work for a long time. She shut the door. "Do not make a sound," she whispered. She put a finger to her lips and looked through the crack. Her eyes were steady. Daniel could hear voices outside. It was Melissa and Evan. Their talk was soft, like people who live in a house and think it is safe. Daniel watched through the crack and heard Evan say, "He is still breathing." Melissa's voice was smooth. "Then double the dose in his drink. Make sure it gets done." The words hit him like cold water. His throat closed. His heart felt strange. Naomi held him so he would not fall. She pulled him out the back door and into her old car. It was worn, but moving felt better than staying. Daniel wanted to call the police. Naomi shook her head. "Do not call anyone," she said. "He has friends who work for him. They might be on their side. Calling will tell them where you are." They drove while rain hit the car. Daniel looked back at the lights of his home. Naomi drove to a scrapyard where old metal lay in piles. She tossed his phone and watched into a bin until the metal thudded and fell silent. Daniel felt both loss and a strange relief. The things that once told people where he was were gone. Naomi took him to her small house in a rough part of the city. The house was plain but tidy. She gave him water and wrapped him in a blanket. Daniel lay on the couch and felt shame like a cold that did not end. He thought of the times he walked past Naomi without looking. He thought of how he had put trust in names and titles. As his fever burned, his mind played back the last weeks. He remembered the mornings when his stomach had turned after a drink. He remembered Melissa's soft touch and how it felt like a plan. He thought of Evan's easy laugh that hid a strange patience. He felt small and empty. Naomi watched the street from the window and would not let anyone in. A neighbor walked by and stared. Naomi's face tightened, but she did not show worry to Daniel. She folded his blanket and fed him soup. She said simple things like, "Stay with me. You must get better." The days passed slowly. Naomi sat beside him and held his hand when the heat came. She fanned him and spoke in small words. Her care did not come from money or from duty. It came from something plain and deep. Daniel began to see her as a person, not just a face, that cleaned his dishes. On the third day, his fever dropped enough that he could sit. He felt weak, but his mind was clearer. He wanted to find out who he could trust. Naomi told him what she knew and what she believed. She warned him that some people who worked for him might be part of the plan. "Do not call your friends yet," she said. "Take small steps. Think slow." Daniel listened. He drank his water and watched Naomi move around the small room. She did the small things that keep a person alive. She boiled water and washed dishes and kept the windows closed. Her life was plain and hard. It kept him alive. At night, Daniel would wake and remember Melissa putting the cup to his lips. He would feel a fierce heat of shame and anger. He thought of the life he had built and how it could be turned into a trap. He knew he had to wake up and see clearly. Naomi sat beside him in the dark and kept watch. "You will not die now," she said once. Daniel squeezed her hand and felt a strange new hope. Outside, the city moved on. Inside the small house, two people held a quiet truth. The next steps would be hard and slow. He would not forget her quiet, steady help. The days after the fever were slow. Daniel woke and felt the quiet like a thick cloth. Naomi made tea and set it by his hand. He drank and watched her move. She cleaned the small room and then sat down across from him. They spoke in small pieces. Daniel asked about her life. Naomi said she had worked in many houses and had a son. She kept her words plain. Daniel felt shame for never asking before. He had not known the weight in her steps. He said sorry in small ways and meant it. They began to plan. Naomi told him what she saw. She said the captain he might trust could be on Evan's side. She showed him a note she had found in a trash bag. It spoke of pills and keeping a man quiet. Daniel read the words and his hands trembled. He folded the paper and hid it in his pocket. Naomi taught him simple tricks. How to walk like a stranger. How to keep his voice low. How to carry nothing that would tell where he had been. Daniel put on an old hat and a cheap coat and laughed once at himself. He looked small and plain. Naomi smiled like someone who had won a small fight. Neighbors watched them. Mrs. Cora came by with bread and looked at Naomi's car as if it had no right to be there. Naomi answered with a small smile. She told the neighbors simple things and kept the door closed. Daniel felt the sharp look of eyes that did not belong to him. Days moved like slow steps. Naomi boiled soup and kept watch at night. Daniel burned notes he did not want saved. He stopped wearing his old clothes. He learned to be a man who would not be found by a single ping from a phone or watch. 1 week passed, and Daniel felt better. He wanted to put the truth where many people could see it. He thought of a charity night, where the rich gathered. If he showed himself there, their lies would crack in public. Naomi feared the crowd, but she knew the crowd might be a shield as well. They made a plan. Go to the event, but do not bring phones. Keep the proof in paper and in memory. Naomi would stay back in the dark and watch faces. Daniel would walk in like a man who had come back from travel. He would not speak to the captain. He would not run. The night of the event felt heavy. Daniel put on plain clothes and walked like a man who wanted to be small. Naomi tied a scarf and told him to keep his eyes down. They stepped into the room that used to hold his power. Now the hall felt bright and loud, full of music and candles and cameras. People smiled and moved. Daniel saw faces that had taken his name and used it. He saw Evan across the room. Evan looked like the man who owned the room. He moved with a smooth step and a clean smile. Naomi stayed near the edge. She watched and counted small things. She watched Evan as he turned toward her like a hawk. He walked over and grabbed her wrist. His hand was tight and quick. Naomi made a small sound, but the music swallowed it. Daniel stood and pushed through the crowd. He hit Evan hard, and the sound of the blow filled the room. People gasped, and someone shouted. Evan hit the floor, and the room turned from a party to a noisy place where people pointed and phones rose. Then men in dark suits moved in. They were not guests. They were agents with papers. One read a name and held up a small card. He said, "This is a warrant." Melissa's face changed. She tried to speak, but no sound came. The agents moved, and Melissa and Evan were taken. The crowd moved like a wave, and the lights flashed. Cameras focused on Daniel and on Naomi. Daniel did not look for pity. He looked for the truth. He stepped forward and told the truth in small, clear words. He said Melissa and Evan had tried to end his life. He said he had proof. People listened as the agent spoke, and the room smelled of new trouble. Naomi stood beside him like a rock in quick water. Daniel felt a new courage that came from being seen by one person who loved nothing from him. He felt more sure than he had in days. They would have to face people who lied, people who looked away, some who feared the truth. Step by step, with care, they would try to find justice and heal what was broken. The next day, the city spoke of the night. People pointed, and some turned their backs. Daniel sat and watched the news with a steady breath. He had told the truth in the hall. The words had moved like a small rock dropped in a pond. Agents came and asked many questions. They wanted papers, times, and names. Daniel gave them the note Naomi had found. He told them where he had been sick. Naomi stood close and did not move when men in suits passed. She kept her head low, but her look was steady. Some people who had helped could not keep their story. One by one they spoke. The estate manager, Marina, cried and said she had been told to bring supplements and not to ask questions. Her words made the plan clear. Melissa sat in a bright room and faced a man with a badge. She wore the same dress, but her face was hard. When the agent asked about the drink, she had no easy answer. The law moved, and doors closed. Evan sat at a table with a light over him. He tried to keep his face calm. Men took his watch and his phone. He tried to speak, but the room showed him the cost of his plan. Daniel felt a strange calm in the middle of all this. He had come close to dying, and a simple woman had kept him alive. Now truth came out in small pieces. He walked to the place where reporters stood and held Naomi's hand. Microphones came forward. People wanted to know what had happened. Daniel spoke in clear, short words. He told the crowd he had been sick and that his brother and wife had tried to hurt him. He did not ask for pity. He wanted the truth to be clear. "Naomi saved my life," he said. The room went quiet. People looked at the woman who had stood at the edge of his life and now stood in the light. Naomi looked at him and seemed unsure of the strange attention. He held her hand so she would not step back. Reporters shouted and cameras moved. Daniel told them that money could not buy true care. He said that loyalty is not for sale and a real friend will stand when all falls apart. After the press, the agents took more statements. There would be court days and questions. Daniel knew the next steps would be slow and careful. For now, he felt more steady than before. That night, Daniel asked Naomi to go to a small diner away from the lights. He wanted to eat with her, not as the man who paid her, but as someone who wanted to learn. Naomi accepted the simple offer. She did not want money. She wanted to be seen as a person. They walked the streets that had once felt like a stage he owned. Now the lights seemed less sharp. Daniel told Naomi about a trip he had once taken and how people had smiled without money. Naomi laughed and shared a small memory of her son. They spoke of small things, and it felt true. Days moved, and the law moved with them. Some people were charged. Some were quiet and told what they knew. The city began to heal in small ways as truth spread. Daniel changed little things. He kept a cheap hat for walks and bought bread at the market. He learned to speak simply to the men who sold fruit. Naomi went back to her life, but she also had Daniel's offer. He had asked if she would come to dinner with him as an equal, not as a worker. She had said yes. She wanted no payment for that. Weeks later, the case reached a room with a judge and a bright light. Questions were asked and papers read. Melissa's face cracked under the weight of the words. Evan tried to hide, but the truth kept finding cracks. The judge listened, and the law took its slow steps. People who had ignored Naomi now spoke of her with a small respect. Daniel felt the sting of how easy it had been to miss care that bore no gold. He walked with Naomi in quiet streets, and they talked about bread and about small joys. He learned names of people who made the city move. One evening they sat in Naomi's car and looked at the lights. Daniel had a small box that held nothing heavy. He did not promise a full life or force a quick change. He offered a choice: to walk this new path together, to keep truth and care at the center, and to not forget the cost that had been paid. Naomi weighed the look in his eyes. She thought of nights she had watched him sleep and days she had kept him warm. She thought of the risk she had taken and the small price she had asked. She reached out and took his hand. They drove away in the old car, the engine steady and slow. Daniel did not go to a car of bright paint. He chose to ride with the woman who had given him life when the world had nearly taken it. The city moved on, with people who would talk and remember. They knew they would face hard days, court lines, angry words, and nights of doubt. But they would also find small joys: a warm meal, a clean home, a child's laugh. Each small thing would be a step. Together they would try to build a life where truth mattered more than gold. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that the people who love you the loudest are not always the ones who love you the most. And sometimes, the true strength and loyalty comes from the people you least expect. It shows us that trust, care, and courage can come in the smallest, quietest ways. And that real heroes don't always wear crowns or sit in power. Take a moment and think, who would stand by you when everything collapses? Who would risk everything for you, without asking for anything in return? We want to hear from you. So comment below where you are watching from, and tell us what you learned from this story. Did it change the way you see the people around you? If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with your friends so more people can feel this story. And if you want more stories like this, comment "more stories," and you will be the first to get our next emotional and suspenseful stories. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the truest loyalty is the quietest one.